Incredible millionaire discovers surprising truth as his maid faces. Humiliation on $8 blind date. David leaned back in his leather chair, hovering over a glass of aged bourbon, the laughter of his so-called friends reverberating against the marble walls of his sprawling mansion. They were an elite bunch, each clad in designer suits and dripping with self-importance. Yet, all he felt was a gnawing weight in his stomach as their eyes mocked Leah, his loyal maid, while she prepared for her $8 blind date. The banter turned cruel, pressed into the air like a leaden weight, and an unsettling mix of emotions coiled within him. These people, with their successful facades, were dismantling the dignity of someone who served them daily. As he listened, contempt swept over him. He prided himself on building a tech empire from scratch. Yet here he was, trapped in this insipid bubble of wealth, disconnected from authenticity. How did he let himself become part of such a superficial world? Guilt festered at the edges of his conscience, chasing away the fleeting moments of satisfaction that chased him in corners of his mind. David's thoughts raced as the laughter exploded again, now punctuating Leah's vulnerability, an aching scream in a crowded room. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Clenching his fist tightly, David's internal conflict surged. The glitzy future he'd woven with sheer ambition seemed strained underneath childhood lessons of empathy and humility. Was he to be just another wealthy puppet, dancing to the strings of privilege? He followed Leah discreetly, feeling weightless yet burdened by his choices. The cafe she arrived at was bustling, alive with chatter that should comfort, but instead felt stifling. What he witnessed felt like shards of glass slicing through him as Leah was greeted by her date, a man whose smug smile belied his true nature. The air thickened as the man cast disparaging remarks towards Leah. David's breath came in quick bursts as he stood frozen, the anger boiling in his veins. Leah attempted to maintain her composure, but the man's venom-filled words had already begun to corrode her spirit. What was glaringly evident was that she was more than a housekeeper. She was a reservoir of untapped potential, shadows of artistry flickering within her. Anguish crushed around him as he grappled with his privilege. Turning away, the repercussions of confronting his friends loomed over him like an approaching storm, threatening the facade he had built. Would they ostracize him for siding with someone they deemed beneath them? A twinge of desperation coursed through him. To speak up meant losing everything he had surrounded himself with. But how could he ignore the voices that whispered truths he once turned a blind eye to? This new chapter in his life, ignited by Leah's quiet resilience, stirred conflict that he never anticipated. He was teetering on the edge of a knife, a precipice of choice between his old life and a deeper understanding of humanity. As seeds of connection began to blossom between them, he sensed the looming pressure from his friends, their resentment brewing like a storm cloud above, and he steeled himself for the confrontation that could change everything. The question weighed heavily on him. What did it truly mean to rise above the judgments of others? Would he have the courage to face the tidal wave of his past, or would he willingly drown in the comfort of privilege? The morning sun filtered through the grand windows of David's mansion, casting elongated shadows that danced across the polished floor. He stood, staring blankly at his reflection in the glass, wrestling with the implications of his choices. The echoes of laughter from the previous night burned in his mind, a barrage of superficiality that gnawed deeper than any business deal he'd ever made. Determined to shake off the weight of shame, he grabbed his laptop and retreated to his home office, seeking solace in spreadsheets and algorithms. Numbers had always been his refuge, a language where he wielded control. But today, they couldn't quiet the inner turmoil brewing within him. Leah lingered in his thoughts, a beacon of authenticity amid a sea of pretentiousness. What potential have I overlooked? He wondered, his curiosity mingling with guilt. He opened a new project file, its blank canvas inviting creativity. In essence, he longed to create something that could genuinely impact lives rather than just filling his bank account. Ideas surged like tidal waves. He contemplated a philanthropic initiative aimed at empowering individuals like Leah, hidden talents waiting to be unveiled. David envisioned a platform where art met technology, offering exposure to raw, unpolished talent. But would it tarnish his image, or could this become his legacy? The idea sparked something inside him, a flicker of purpose. He spent hours refining the concept, layering it with capabilities that could aid those silenced by society's judgments. The more he brainstormed, the more clarity he gained. With each word typed, he felt a tug away from his past, a possible pathway to redefine his existence. But the nagging concern still loomed large. What would his friends say? As a man who had always relished their acceptance, the thought of risking social capital was daunting. Yet the thought of watching Leah suffer under the weight of debasing comments was far worse. He wavered. The dichotomy of ambition and empathy tore at him. It was time to confront the heart of the matter. Consumed by determination, he decided to invite Leah to lunch. Would she be receptive to sharing her story? Was it too presumptuous to think she might want to help him shape this initiative? Deep within, he recognized that engaging her in this project wouldn't merely be about acknowledging her potential, but would also signify his departure from empty wealth. It began to dawn on him that perhaps her presence in his life was a catalyst for his transformation. David felt a ripple of apprehension as he reached for his phone. He envisioned the audacity it would take to bring Leah into this world of affluence. Yet, standing at the precipice of change, he knew that real strength was born not of dominance but vulnerability. As the phone rang, his heart raced in anticipation, a mixture of hope and dread flooding his system. "Leah, can we meet for lunch?" he asked, trying to sound casual, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "Of course, Mr. Warner," she replied, her voice steady but tinged with surprise. He hung up, a swirl of emotions coursing through him. This meeting could be the turning point, a clarion call to not just elevate her but to strip away the layers of his outdated identity. As he paced the room, the gravity of his choices crashed heavily around him. Would he have the courage to bare his soul and reveal the ambitious project built on their shared humanity? The moment of truth was approaching, and with it, the sense that his transformation was just beginning. What awaited him when he confronted Leah at that lunch table? The answer loomed just ahead, tantalizing yet terrifying. David's anticipation hung in the air as he sat on the patio where he had arranged to meet Leah, the sleek design of his home casting shadows that danced eerily in the afternoon sun. He fiddled with his silver watch, each tick amplifying his anxiety. This was more than just a meeting. It was the linchpin for his envisioned future. Would Leah's story become the cornerstone of this philanthropic endeavor, or would the lunch erupt into a debacle, reinforcing his fears of failure? He took a deep breath as Leah arrived, her presence undeniably grounding amid the chaos of his thoughts. She wore a simple dress, effortlessly radiant, embodying the authenticity he craved. As she approached, even the extravagant setting seemed to fade into the background, her genuine spirit outshining the opulence that had once defined him. "Mr. Warner, it's nice to see you," she said warmly, a hint of uncertainty lacing her smile. David cleared his throat, suddenly feeling the weight of his title. "Please call me David," he replied, extending his hand to her, an offering of familiarity. They settled into conversation, but the topics danced around superficial pleasantries. Both were aware of the deeper conversation waiting just beneath the surface. David watched her intently, searching for cues of vulnerability, wondering how to bridge the gap between their worlds. "Leah, I've been thinking a lot about my next steps." He started cautiously, eyes boring into hers. "I want to create a space where talent isn't measured by status or wealth, but by passion and creativity." A flicker of curiosity sparked in Leah's expression. "That sounds ambitious. What do you need me for?" David felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Her straightforwardness struck him as both refreshing and intimidating. "I believe you could help shape this project. Your story, your experiences, they can inspire and guide us." Leah's laughter rang out, light yet sharp. "Me? I'm just a maid, David. What do I know about your world?" The word struck him, a reminder of the insidious stereotypes that perpetuated barriers. "You know more than you realize. It's not about where you come from. It's about the potential you hold." He leaned forward, willing her to see the vision he was crafting. "For every high society party I've seen, there's a counterpart of struggle and artistry that often goes forgotten. You have a unique perspective." She regarded him, processing his words, her brow slightly furrowed. "It's easy to say that when you sit on the other side of the fence. People often condescend, thinking they can fix everything with money and influence." "Yes," he conceded, the reality hitting harder than he expected. "But maybe together we can create something different, something genuine." Leah hesitated. The tension between ambition and her own life experiences palpable. "And what's in it for you, David? Is this about redemption for your previous choices?" Her question cut deep, setting him off balance. He realized he had to confront the truth within himself. "I'm tired of existing for image. I want this to mean more than just a line on my resume. I want to actually create change." As Leah absorbed his admission, David felt his walls begin to crumble. Justifying his journey was no longer about seeking approval, but rather understanding his moral compass. In that moment, he could see her skepticism soften, recognizing the potential for a true partnership. "All right, let's say I'm in. What would that look like?" The challenges ahead began to form in David's mind, a tumult of fear and excitement mixing as he envisioned the work required to make this initiative flourish. He realized this would demand far more than just a financial investment. It would necessitate vulnerability, collaboration, and honesty, a far cry from what he had once known. "Together we can start defining talent beyond what's traditionally accepted," he replied, his voice firm, feeling a newfound determination. "It won't be easy, but if we can show the world what's possible, perhaps others will see the value as well." Leah nodded slowly, the crest of a smile beginning to form as his passion lit a spark within her. But just as hope surged, a nagging fear crept back in. What would his affluent friends think when they discovered he was associating with someone they deemed beneath them? As they spoke, the sun began to set, casting a fiery glow that symbolized the warmth growing between them, yet simultaneously shadowed the doubts lurking in David's mind. The moment felt pivotal, a potential turning point where goals could evolve into reality. But as Leah engaged further, it was clear that his journey was no longer just about redefining instincts. It would also mean confronting the prejudices and doubts of his social circle. What revelations awaited them both as they embarked on this daring new path? David was about to find out that the true test of his integrity lay just ahead. The sun disappeared behind the horizon, casting long shadows that began to envelop David and Leah, mirroring the internal struggles of his heart. The conversation had shifted, weaving an intricate tapestry of aspirations and realities. David leaned back, exhaling gently, the weight of his privilege suddenly feeling both burdensome and ill-fitting. "Tell me more about your story, Leah," he prompted, sensing an untapped reservoir of resilience that lay deep within her. Perhaps her experiences could light the path that both of them were searching for. Leah hesitated, casting her gaze toward the ground, the vulnerability of her past tugging at her. "It's not glamorous. My family struggled to make ends meet. We worked hard, day after day, and sometimes it felt like we were invisible." Her voice wavered momentarily before steadiness returned. "It taught me a lot about perseverance, but it also made me acutely aware of the divide between the lives we lead and those you live." David felt the familiar swell of anger rise. Anger at a system that prided itself on rags-to-riches stories while glossing over the ones that never saw the light. "You're anything but invisible. You have a voice, and it deserves to be heard. That's what I want, nothing less," he asserted, determination weaving itself into each word. "And what if I want no part of your world? What if I don't want to share my story for your gain? Leah's challenge took him aback. This was a confrontation, and in its rawness, it was refreshing. Then let's find a way to share it that feels right to you, he suggested, feeling the need for adaptability rising within him. It's your experience that I want to highlight, not to bolster my own image. We can create something together that isn't transactional. Leah surveyed him for a long moment, weighing his sincerity. The tension between them crackled like electricity, as if both could sense the nascent partnership that was forming, but had yet to solidify. David felt his ambition reach deeper when she finally nodded slowly, the hint of curiosity woven into her cautious expression. All right, let's consider it. But let's be clear. Just because you want to help doesn't mean I trust the world you come from. People in your circles can be predatory. David swallowed hard at her words. He had lived in that world, had seen its darker corners, but the truth was he didn't defend that side of himself anymore. He was actively trying to redefine it. I can't change who I was, but I can show you who I am now. Then prove it, she challenged, the spark of intrigue igniting something inside David. The conversation shifted gears, with piecing together strategies to convey their shared vision. David began to outline ideas for workshops and showcases that would magnify artistic talent, free from conventional biases. He sketched loose frameworks, his fingers creating outlines in the air, while Leah's eyes lit with cautious optimism. Yet beneath their earnest planning, David felt an impending dread. The thought of what awaited him when he returned to his circle loomed heavily. Would they scorn him for moving in Leah's direction? Would they perceive him as a hypocrite, or worse, a social pariah? As the shadows deepened in the dimming light, they set parameters for the next steps. Each suggestion poured from David seamlessly, yet he knew that the road ahead was anything but straightforward. Let's meet here again tomorrow, Leah suggested, voice rising with newfound hope, and start mapping out those ideas. Tomorrow, he echoed, though a sick flutter brewed in his stomach. Would tomorrow bring new ironies to face? Would he shrink back at the sight of his world's expectations colliding with this new path? After Leah left, David lingered in silence, grappling with the reality that his transformation was no longer just personal. It was about how to radically shift conversations that had historically remained untouched. But as he stared out into the darkening sky, shadows creeping around him, he realized the test of his resolve was about to intensify. Morning would not just break on a new day. It would break into the confrontation of everything he had left behind. What awaited him on the other side of this precarious commitment? The question nagged at him like an uninvited guest, lingering far too long, compelling him to confront not just his choices, but who he was willing to become. The morning light crept through the window, slicing the lingering shadows of the previous night. David's mind buzzed with dissonant thoughts. He could barely recall the time he had spent in his luxury apartments or designer suits, lost in the tides of ambition that once felt unassailable. Now, dressed in a smart yet comfortable outfit, he scrutinized his reflection, searching for the man he wanted to be rather than the one he had always been. Deciding to refocus this uncertainty into clarity, he grabbed his notebook. The pages, once filled with self-serving goals, were now a canvas for transformative ideas with Leah. If only he could harness the same intensity he felt in her presence. Arriving at their meeting spot, David's expectations tangled with anxieties in his chest. This time, it was not just about projecting his vision for artistic community. It was about genuinely collaborating, navigating the intricacies of a partnership that required both vulnerability and authenticity, qualities he struggled to display. When Leah arrived, her expression was steeled but curious, as if she was still searching for the finer details to bridge their disparate worlds. "Ready to make some noise?" she quipped, her smile hinting at the prospect of genuine collaboration, one that understood the weight of their histories. "Yes, but in a way that voices your narrative," he replied earnestly, striking a balance between determination and respect. Together they began to sketch out plans, their dialogue flowing effortlessly as they challenged each other's ideas with constructive criticisms. Every strategy they forged was tinged with the knowledge that not all outcomes mattered to an audience that had historically consumed stories but not engaged in genuine understanding. With each passing minute, David's fear morphed from hesitation to a twitch of exhilaration, a loaded gun pointed toward an uncertain target. Would their work withstand the scrutiny of those around him? As Leah explained a concept for a platform that could empower other unheard voices, David interjected, "What if we could incorporate mentorship? You could guide others through the same maze we're navigating now." The gleam in her eyes ignited a rush of inspiration in him. Or workshops that promote storytelling through art. We could show the complexities instead of merely the resolutions. She expanded excitedly, each word drawing them closer to a shared dream. Yet even as they sculpted their ambitions, the shadows from his past loomed large. Each mention of potential outreach triggered his doubts. Would his circle support such a venture, or would they outright dismiss it as mere folly? Such resentment at the unknown festered, threatening to derail the fragile foundation they were building. David's thoughts spiraled, the weight of doubt creeping into the corners of his mind. By the time they finished outlining their initial steps, the air between them thickened with a new intensity. This fledgling partnership felt transformative, yet he sensed an undercurrent of impending conflict. "We have something meaningful here," he stated, trying to anchor himself while uncertainty surged. "But how do we present this to those who won't understand?" Leah scrutinized him for a heartbeat too long, forcing a confrontation he didn't know he was avoiding. "This is not about them. If we chase validation over authenticity, we're merely reflecting a world we both want to dismantle." Her words struck like a chord, reverberating deep within his chest. She was right. He had been caught in the cycle of seeking approval instead of forging his own path. "I need to commit," he replied, realization dawning. "Then do it," Leah urged, her voice steady like the ground beneath them. "But understand, a commitment means facing your fears head-on." David nodded, a new resolve emerging. He realized he had what it took to challenge the status quo and cultivate formation where authenticity reigned. Would that resolve hold when push came to shove? As Leah departed, David felt a strange calm mix with the anticipation tightening in his gut. The intersection of fear and determination set a stage he had yet to navigate. How would he step into the fray with the voices from his past amplifying each doubt? Would he carry through on this newfound purpose, or would the shadows of his former life swallow him whole? Tomorrow would unveil the moment where everything could change. The invitation to his old world was waiting, and he had to decide whether to answer it or turn away. David rose early, the sun barely kissing the horizon, its soft glow dimming the harshness of his choices. A sense of trepidation washed over him. He was perched on the edge of a decision that could redefine who he was. This morning was different. Today he would meet his past, and for the first time he wouldn't allow it to dictate his future. He had confirmed the meeting with his old colleagues at the high-end firm. The familiar venue, a lavish cafe lined with opulence, evoked memories he thought he had left behind. Yet there was a strange thrill tugging at him, intertwined with dread. He skimmed through his notebook, dissecting the empowering ideas he and Leah had brainstormed, using them as armor against the pressures he anticipated. What if these very people who had once heralded him as a prodigy could only see him as an afterthought, a renegade stepping away from their vision of success? As he approached the cafe, the scent of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods filled the air, but it did little to calm the storm brewing within him. He hesitated at the entrance, the plush environment feeling like a prison of the life he was trying to escape. He could turn back, embrace the clarity Leah had inspired, or step inside and risk being pulled back into the cycle of validation. With a deep breath, he pushed through the heavy doors, and moments later, he spotted them. His former colleagues engaged in boisterous laughter, their lives seemingly untouched by introspection. The familiar faces that once filled him with pride now ignited a flicker of anxiety. Their expressions shifted as they noticed him, and he was met with a mix of surprise and mild disdain, as if he were a ghost of ambitions past. "David," greeted Mark, his previous boss, a hint of condescension veiling his enthusiasm. "You look different. Still doing that freelance thing?" David swallowed harshly, attempting to anchor himself. "Actually, I'm focusing on something more impactful now." Community collaboration, creating platforms for underrepresented voices, he stated, his voice steadier than he felt. The collective chuckles and raised brows hit him like daggers. Impatience crept into his chest, each condescending remark a reminder of how easily others could dismiss his growth. But Leah's words echoed in his mind, authenticity over validation. He recalibrated his stance, forcing a smile that felt genuine despite the tightening in his throat. "That's ambitious," Mark replied, a thin veneer of politeness masking his skepticism. "But you know, the industry thrives on proven success. How do you plan to sustain yourself?" "I'm learning to thrive beyond traditional measures of success," David countered, surprising himself with the strength behind his conviction. It was as if Leah was standing beside him, encouraging him to reclaim his narrative. The laughter buzzed on around him, yet he felt detached from the conversation. The real dialogue began to unfold within him as he stood his ground, embracing the intensity of judgment rather than shrinking from it. A creeping realization washed over him. He had grown beyond the confines of their expectations. In that moment, as subtle jabs continued to flit through the air, he saw more clearly than ever before. These men weren't cruel. They conformed to a system he once idolized, but now recognized as flawed. While they were busy dismissing him, he was busy redefining success on his own terms. Then his gaze landed on the corner of the cafe where Leah had advised him to focus on the bottom line of his passion. Unbeknownst to him, people outside this world would be inspired by what he created, even if these former colleagues couldn't see it. As the conversation reached a fever pitch, an overwhelming cacophony of disbelief and mockery, David felt an igniting passion. He was ready to leap into uncertain waters, to embrace discomfort as a catalyst for growth. Would he allow the shadows of their neglect to linger and color his decisions, or would he focus on the clear vision Leah had rekindled in him? He took a step back from the table, his instincts screaming for change. "I appreciate your concerns," he interrupted, gaining their puzzled attention. "But it seems our paths have diverged. I'm redefining the rules, and I plan to invite those who matter along for the ride." With that, he spun around, feeling the weight of expectations lift as he exited the cafe, his heart racing with fear and exhilaration. The impending journey with Leah loomed in front of him, certain yet fraught with risk, and he felt empowered to dive in. The question that lingered wasn't if he would follow through, but how he would embrace the unknown that lay ahead. His resolve was not yet tested, and tomorrow would bring a new challenge. What awaited him in the new venture with Leah, and could he truly face the consequences of constructing the platform he envisioned? David stepped onto the bustling city street, the fresh air pulling him back from the fog of self-doubt that had briefly engulfed him inside the cafe. The laughter and condescension faded, leaving him alone with his thoughts. He had made a choice. The old ties no longer defined him. It felt exhilarating yet terrifying. This was the beginning of something more profound, a transition away from validation by others toward authenticity. A life sculpted by his own hands. His phone vibrated in his pocket, startling him from his reverie. It was Leah, her name lighting up the screen, bringing with it a jolt of reassurance. "Hey, how did it go?" Her tone was light but held an underlying excitement that mirrored his own anticipation. "I went," he replied, keeping it vague as he crossed the street, dodging a couple of early morning commuters in a hurry. "I faced them, Leah, and I stood my ground. I told them I was redefining success." "David, that's huge. How did it feel?" She must have sensed the mix of fear and elation in his voice because her next words were filled with encouragement. It felt liberating and suffocating all at once. They couldn't see what I was building. They just saw a dropout, he confessed, tightening his grip on the phone. A flicker of anger flashed through him. But it also stung. It's as if every word was a reminder of my past. Leah paused briefly, allowing his feelings to saturate the silence. "That's normal. But do you see how far you've come already? You faced them. Now we focus on what you want to create." He quickened his step, feeling a newfound lightness. "Right. It's time to pivot. I need to center the vision I have in my head. Let's meet at the co-working space. We'll brainstorm a strategy. We have to structure your ideas into something actionable," she suggested, As David arrived at the co-working space, he felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. He couldn't just dive into the creative wellspring without a method. As thrilling as the prospect was, a foundation was necessary. Entering the vibrant office flooded with natural light, he spotted Leah at a long table strewn with papers and colorful markers, her enthusiasm palpable. "Okay, let's break it down," she said, ushering him to a seat. "What does your platform look like? What core values drive it?" He inhaled deeply. David had spent countless hours conjuring images of what he wanted to build. "I wanted to elevate voices that often get overlooked. A space for stories of struggle, resilience, and triumph. It's not just about individual success. It's about collective narratives." Leah nodded. "Right, and each story has a lesson wrapped in it. What form do you want it to take?" "Maybe a digital platform, but also live events, workshops, discussions, an engagement space," he articulated, warming to the topic. "I want it to feel authentic, not like another corporate gig." "Then you need your brand to reflect that, David. Your experiences, your journey. What makes you different?" Suddenly a wave of self-assertion washed over him. "I can show my journey without fear. Those early judgments don't define me, and this space will reflect that courage. Every story shared will highlight the beauty and vulnerability." "Exactly. And how will you market this?" she pressed, leaning in closer. He paused, grappling with the potential pitfalls of self-promotion. "I don't want to exploit people's struggles for clicks or likes. That's the opposite of what I envision." Leah smiled knowingly. "Then let's build your credibility first. Create meaningful partnerships and invite those who resonate with your mission. You'll create a movement instead of just a product." David felt energized by the idea of a shared journey rather than a solitary selling experience. He began to sketch out a blueprint on the whiteboard, colors splashing across the canvas of his imagination, each stroke depicting not only a path forward but the network of connections he hoped to cultivate. Just as clarity emerged, the weight of self-doubt clawed at him once more. Could he truly create something impactful in a world that often rejected the rawness of personal narratives? That evening, he left the co-working space invigorated yet uncertain. He had moved forward, but the threshold of the new project loomed dauntingly ahead. Was he prepared to wrestle with not just the external challenges, but the internal struggle, facing critics not just in the industry but the lingering voices from his past? His resolve bubbled beneath the surface, ready to confront those doubts once and for all. Tomorrow, he would need to find the courage not just to lead, but to be vulnerable, opening himself to the very criticism he had faced at the cafe. As he turned the corner, an unexpected thought blared through his mind. What if those who had dismissed him were right? Would they circle back to challenge him again when he least expected it? The lingering question ignited a fire within him. The time had come to face his fears head-on and dismantle the barriers solidifying his doubts. What awaited him next would determine whether he could accelerate his journey or allow the past to re-emerge, like shadows creeping back into the light. David awoke the next morning, the sunlight filtering through the blinds, illuminating the scattered remnants of his ambitious plans. His mind was a whirlwind, caught between yesterday's exhilaration and today's daunting reality. As he held his phone, the screen blank and waiting for input, he felt the tension coil in his stomach. He needed a plan, a structured approach to beat back the doubts lurking at the edges of his resolve. He took a deep breath, pushing away the nagging thoughts on potential failure. What would it mean to reveal himself fully when he felt so fragile inside? He dismissed the notion. There was no space for fear if he was to carve his identity anew. After a quick breakfast, he headed to the co-working space where Leah awaited him, brimming with ideas. The thought of facing her excitement stoked his determination to channel whatever uncertainty he still felt into action. "Hey, you're early," Leah greeted, her energy unmistakable. "I've been brainstorming ways to launch your first campaign. What do you think about starting with a video series?" She slid a stack of papers across the table, detailing visual themes and potential content. David picked up the pages, scanning the vibrant ideas. A video series could be powerful, personal stories that resonate, like your suggestion of vulnerability. As he began to engage with the material, A knot of former hesitations unraveled. But how do we ensure authenticity? Leah leaned in, her eyes glimmering with excitement. We can feature real people, previously overlooked voices. Their raw stories can help build trust. Authenticity comes from being real, David, something you know intimately. The way she challenged him to step deeper into his own narrative was invigorating. But with that challenge came the stark realization of the risks involved. People might not understand. They might mock these stories instead of valuing them. They could. But that's where you need to be bold. Leah countered, her voice powering him through the doubt. This is about redefining perspectives. You're speaking from your core. The words ignited something inside David. He started outlining the structure for the video series, segments that included interviews interspersed with his commentary, to guide the audience through each story. But a nagging thought persisted. Who was he to be the narrator of others' narratives? Wait, he said, a question forming. Am I qualified to share these stories? To be a voice? Absolutely, Leah shot back with conviction. No one else has your unique lens, a dropout turned visionary. If you don't share what you've learned, how will people connect? People want to see the journey, not just read a script. Let's talk about the real you. Her straightforwardness cut through his apprehensions, and he could sense the shift inside himself, a burgeoning courage against the impending critiques. As they delved deeper into the logistics of production, his vision began to crystallize. David realized setbacks would come and fears would rise, but his creative aspirations weren't just stories to sell. They were connections waiting to be forged. After several hours, he found himself energized, buoyed by the consensus that their efforts would both showcase fragility and strength, the very experiences that shaped who he was. Yet just when momentum seemed to wrap around him, another fight emerged within. How to position himself not just as a leader but as a learner in this new environment. He took a slate of paper and began jotting down the core values he wanted to communicate. Honesty, empathy, strength and vulnerability. A blueprint for his personal brand that felt right and wholly his. As they pieced together the promotional framework, he felt pleasure mixed with doubt when he imagined the response. Would his past be used against him? Could he withstand scrutiny from an ever-watchful world? That specter of judgment lingered, threatening the very foundation they were constructing on the whiteboard before him. In a moment of clarity pierced by anxiety, David resolved to embrace both aspects, truth and fear. His growth would not only be about success, but embracing failure, taking risks, and most importantly, sharing those lessons. Just then, Leah's phone buzzed. She glanced down and her expression soured. David, we need to talk. I'm getting some news that impacts our plan. The tension in the room shifted palpably, leaving David's heart racing. Was this the push he needed or a potential derailment? Would the arrival of external challenges reshape everything they had carefully begun to build? Or was this merely the next chapter in his journey of self-discovery? Leah's words hung heavily in the air, pregnant with uncertainty. David leaned forward, bracing himself for whatever news threatened to topple the precarious balance they had begun to establish. His pulse quickened as he scrutinized her face for clues, a tangle of anticipation and dread knotting in his stomach. There's been a change in the funding, Leah said, her voice steady but strained. The initial backers are pulling out. Something about wanting to invest in safer options. David's heart sank. A sense of loss enveloped him, suffocating the exciting future he had just begun to dream into existence. What does that mean for us? For the project? Leah inhaled sharply, her brow furrowing in thought. It means we might have to pivot our approach or seek out alternative sources. I know it sounds daunting, but it's not the end. This is a chance to explore new avenues. The words rang hollow against the backdrop of his growing anxiety. He had dared to unwind the chains of his past while grasping for hopeful momentum, only to encounter the specter of setbacks yet again. How am I supposed to keep pushing forward if I can't guarantee funding stability? His vulnerability spilled over, tasting metallic and bitter. Perhaps the stakes were too high, and his determination too naive. Change is challenging, David, Leah said, her conviction unwavering. But you've shown resilience before. It's been about challenging your perception of failure all along, right? This is just another opportunity to apply that lesson, to rethink our strategy. As her voice steadied him, the fight inside David stirred anew. He couldn't afford to back down. If this venture represented more than just a professional ambition, if it encapsulated his irrefutable need to connect and impact lives, then he had to forge ahead despite uncertainty. He exhaled slowly, allowing his thoughts to revive. You're right. Maybe we could shift our angle. Instead of a traditional funding model, what about launching a small crowdfunding campaign instead? Engaging the audience from the beginning could build community around our vision. Leah's eyes brightened. Now that's the spirit. We can emphasize how their contributions will support real stories, not just a product. Authentic engagement could be a huge draw. David felt reinvigorated, his mind whirring with possibilities. Overcoming stagnation required more than acceptance. It demanded a comprehensive strategy that embraced innovation while staying true to his core values. As they sketched out a plan for the campaign, he recognized that every hurdle only sharpened his resolve. With every adjustment to their approach, every creative reinvention, he felt the weight of his past receding. He was not only finding his path, he was building a narrative that intertwined the stories of others with his own. He realized that in learning to embrace change, he was also redefining what it meant to be vulnerable. This moment of doubt wasn't the final chapter. It was a vital twist in the journey that allowed him to emerge stronger. Just as the atmosphere shifted from one of despair to hope, Leah received another message. Her expression changed, revealing a hint of surprise and concern. David, this might be important, she said, glancing at her phone. Remember the guy I told you about who had been considering investing? He wants to meet today, right now. The abruptness of the invitation jolted David. Here was an unexpected opportunity, a chance to present their vision and recapture the momentum they had almost lost. But anticipation mingled with anxiety. How could he present himself with authenticity when everything felt so uncertain? His thoughts raced ahead, and with a hint of mischievous courage he nodded. Let's do it. We've come this far. It's time to bring our story to life and prove this idea matters. Leah smiled, her energy contagious. That's the spirit. Let's get ready. As they hurriedly prepared, David felt an electric charge of determination coursing through him. He was no longer just an aspiring visionary. He was prepared to master his fears and push forward into whatever unknown awaited him. But as they closed the door behind them and stepped into the bustling streets, a profound thought struck him. Could he really rise to this occasion? Would he falter under pressure again? Or had he truly learned the art of resilience? The question lingered as they headed toward their meeting, adrenaline propelling him forward into the unfolding narrative of his life. David stood outside the cafe where he would meet the potential investor, the vibrant sounds of the busy street blending into a distant hum. The air buzzed with a palpable energy, echoing the tension in his chest. Today was different. It was not just about a project or the validation of his peers, but a test of everything he had become. The stakes soared higher with each passing moment. As Leah arrived, her face radiated determination, reflecting the anticipation swirling between them. The moment felt monumental, a culmination of their shared effort and hard-won progress. "Are you ready?" she asked, her steady gaze fortifying him. "I am," he replied, the conviction in his voice surprising even himself. This wasn't merely a pitch. It was a declaration of his transformation. As they walked inside, the soft applause from an ongoing meeting flared briefly in his memory, another reminder of the worlds he was now bridging. They found a quiet corner where moments later, a man clad in a tailored suit approached, extending his hand with an intrigued smile. "David, Leah, I'm James. I'm excited to hear about your project." The small talk floated lightly, the initial pleasantries acting as a buffer. But as David launched into the essence of their vision, he leaned into authenticity, recounting their journey, the challenges faced, the voices they aimed to uplift, the profound necessity for representation that stemmed from his own reckoning. The more he spoke, detailing how their platform would foster community while challenging societal narratives, the stronger his confidence became. James listened intently, nodding along as David painted expansive strokes of possibility. "This initiative is more than business. It's a movement," he emphasized, the weight of each word grounding his resolve further. "We're redefining what it means to cultivate talent, regardless of background. We want to highlight those stories that would otherwise be left untold." With each passage, David felt lighter, liberated from past anxieties, filled with clarity. He could see the potential emerging, not just for the project, but within himself. He wasn't just a participant in a transaction anymore. He was a voice among many, and Leah was there beside him, just as invested. "Sounds ambitious," James remarked, his tone thoughtful. "But what's your plan for sustainability? How will you turn this idea into something viable long-term?" David paused, recalling the meeting with his former colleagues, where doubt had threatened to sweep him away. But this time felt different. He felt prepared, backed by Leah's unwavering support. "We'll engage the community through crowdfunding, bringing them into our journey from the start. By giving them ownership, we empower them to connect with the stories shared. The success of our platform will rely on the narratives we create together." James nodded, and David continued to deliver key messages about mentorship, participation, and breaking societal molds. He articulated how investing in this project wasn't just about securing returns. It was an investment in cultural change. When he finished, a moment of silence stretched between them, the implications of their conversation lingering like a spell. David felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through him, a mix of vulnerability and exhilaration. "I don't think I've ever heard a pitch like that," James finally said, his eyes alight with interest. "Your journey alone could inspire many. I want to be a part of this." The words struck David with fierce clarity. This was validation not of his old life, but of his new purpose. They exchanged ideas for moving forward, a shared enthusiasm sparking as new plans aligned across the table. As they wrapped up, Leah clasped David's arm, a touch of reassurance amid the whirlwind. "We did it, David. You didn't just present an idea, you presented yourself. A new chapter of authenticity." Walking away from the cafe, David felt the shift deep within him. A solid confidence took root as the weight of past judgments faded. He had stepped into the light, not just as an entrepreneur but as a force of meaningful change. Leah beamed at him, her eyes sparkling with palpable pride. "Today marked a turning point. The trajectory of our futures is intertwined now. With this foundation, we can elevate countless voices together." David smiled, recognizing that his transformation was no longer isolated. He had forged connections that transcended former limitations, aiming for something greater that extended beyond individual gain. As the sun dipped into the horizon, casting a warm glow over the city, David understood now he had accomplished something profound. He had navigated the tumultuous waters between fear and ambition, carving out a space where vulnerability wasn't a weakness, but a strength. And as they walked side by side, he made a mental note. This was just the beginning. Tomorrow's challenges awaited, but so did the triumphs of their collective journey, anchored in a shared vision of empowerment. Join David in the unfolding narrative of transformation. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you won't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support creators just like this one, making a difference in the world. Comment below with your reactions, insights, or theories about this incredible ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this powerful conclusion. You need to stand with creators inspiring change.